Energy is a good thing. It underpins our way of life today, and it supports the hope of a better future. Notwithstanding the current economic conditions, it is expected that the population growth and economic development will lead to a doubling of world energy demand by 2050. And this graph shows that up until about 2030. Demand for aviation transport in this period is predicted to increase threefold. More people will need more energy, and the challenge will be to provide it in a sustainable, secure way at a reasonably low cost. The big question is where this energy will come from. Meeting the exponential increase in demand will be an extraordinary challenge. There is no magic bullet, but the full gamut of traditional and alternative sources that are available today, as well as the new alternative sources that will be created in the future, will need to be exploited in order to realise maximum potential. Fossil fuels will deliver the majority of new energy between now and 2025. The primary sources will be coal, including oil sands, natural gas, including unconventional gas. We should all be disappointed with the projected growth in the relatively unclean coal. At Shell and in many other forums, much work is being undergone to improve and promote gas as the cleanest burning hydrocarbon. And that's on a life cycle basis as well. There will be an increased emphasis on making the right fossil fuel choices and making more efficient use of them as we transition to alternative energy and different energy sources in the longer term. But as the planet's energy need increases, so too does the need to reduce man-made CO2 emissions to avoid the potential impacts of climate change. According to the IPCC, a 50% reduction in emissions by 2050 compared to 2000 levels will be necessary to avoid such an impact. Almost a quarter of energy-related CO2 emissions comes from the transport sector, namely moving people and products via roads, railways, the airways, and the oceans. Transport is therefore a major strategic front in the battle against climate change. All conceivable solutions must be brought to bear to cut transport sector emissions. This means better vehicle technologies, but also improved fuels and more efficient and economical transport user behaviours. The aviation sector specifically has an important role to play in reducing man-made CO2 emissions and mitigating the potential effects of climate change. Aside from issues relating to noise pollution and local air quality at airports around the world, the industry accounts for 2% of man-made CO2 emissions globally. At Shell, we focus our efforts to reduce CO2 on 4 pillars: natural gas, biofuels, carbon capture and storage, and energy efficiency. The areas I'll focus on today are energy efficiency, particularly how we are helping customers conserve energy and reduce their own CO2 emissions in the transport sector, and biofuels, which I'll come on to later. And yes, you did hear correctly. Shell is a fuel company that passionately believes in conserving energy. Smarter mobility describes our approach to enabling more people and goods to move around more reliably, more affordably, and more cleanly. Due to these lower temperatures, the process results in lower overall energy consumption of between 25 and 35% compared to conventional asphalt. In both Dubai International Airport and Al Maktoum International Airport, Shell Carafel bitumen has been used for the runways and aprons. This polymer-modified bitumen product has a longer endurance property, which means that the maintenance intervals are lengthened, thus reducing the amount of energy that is required over the full lifetime of the pavement. Aside from bitumen and airports, what other smarter mobility issues are there in the context of aviation? Well, the IPCC predicts that emission resulting from demand growth in the aviation sector may outstrip reductions achieved from improving efficiencies and abatement measures at current rates. Additionally, the IPCC reports that CO2 emitted at altitude may have a multiplier effect on climate change. Given these factors, the aviation sector must exploit all options to tackle its emissions, and it must do so without delay. On this graph, the black bar represents the increase in CO2 emissions in line with demand growth if nothing is done to offset them. The pink bar shows the degree to which we can bring CO2 levels down by using the best technology at our disposal today and improving efficiencies across the industry. The red bar is the emissions target reflecting the necessary 50% reduction. As you can see, aiming for carbon neutral growth is not enough to hit the 50% target. What this shows is that the only way to meet the ambition of reducing CO2 by 50% is to do much more, including more efficient aircraft, new fuels, market-based mechanisms such as cap and trade, and major research and development investments. Reducing CO2 emissions to migrate the threat of climate change is a huge global challenge for governments, industries and consumers alike. Last year, the signatories to the Copenhagen Accord agreed that the increase in global temperature should be constrained to 2 degrees Celsius, and that deep cuts in global CO2 emissions were required to limit concentrations in the atmosphere to no more than 450 parts per million. The Accord is a great step forward, but the pledges that countries made after Copenhagen do not adapt to this aspired trajectory. Recent economic pressures have contributed to the challenge, but regardless, the need for action is pressing.